Hi, everyone. Welcome to Phocuswright's first webinar discussing our annual series of travel technology and innovation trend reports. I'm Mike Coletta, Manager of Research and Innovation at Phocuswright, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by our team of veteran travel industry analysts who've authored our trend reports this year. So these reports are available in our research for our research clients in our online library. So if you're one of our subscribers, I hope you've had a chance to read them all because they're really super interesting and as relevant as ever this year. But this webinar will give everyone a good overview and understanding of each of the trends we've written about, whether you've read the reports or not. Each analyst will have only 5 minutes to present their trend, and these are complex topics, so we won't be able to go into great detail. That's what the reports are for, but we'll share lots of insights. And we'll have about 15 minutes for questions at the end of the session, so please enter your questions in the chat or the Q&A panel as we go, because in the interest of time and keeping the questions focused, I'll pick some for the authors to address during that Q&A time at the end. Before we get into the trends, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize Bob Alfett, who launched our innovation content practice many years ago, and he started these trend reports. Many of you may have met him if you've been in the industry and the Phocuswright ecosystem for a while, and you may know that he retired a couple of years ago. And that's when I took over for him. And he taught me a lot about travel distribution in general, airline tech specifically, including NDC, and things like edge computing and AI. So I really want to give credit where credit's due as we continue to build our innovation content based on what he started. So here are our trend authors for this year. In addition to myself, we have Robert Cole, Norm Rose, Kathy Skitsiana-Walsh, Lorian Cilio, Adam Glickman, and Hollis Thomases. Kathy will be presenting twice as she authored 2 of our reports, and I co-authored a report with her that I'll be presenting. Many of our analysts have been writing for us for a long time, decades in some cases, but Adam is a first timer, so we're glad to have him here with us this year. And here are the 8 trends for this year in the order in which they'll be presented, which is simply the order in which they were published between January and June of this year. And I just have to say it's one of the best parts of my job to research and think about and discuss and ultimately choose these trends every year, and to work closely with our authors to flesh out the details and hone in on what's important. And I'm really excited about the trends for this year because there's obviously so much happening in the technology realm, but whether directly related to technology or not, innovation is just as important as ever, if not more important than ever, as travel companies attempt to differentiate their product in an increasingly hyper-competitive and complex and fast-moving marketplace. And our trend reports are designed to help you do exactly that. Understand the most important trends deeply so you know how to harness or address them in your own businesses. So Robert will be kicking things off, talking about the future of social media, influencers, and social commerce in travel, which I think is a powerful but still underappreciated area. Kathy will be talking about green travel innovation, certainly one of the most important topics of the day. Then our resident Web3 evangelist, Norm, will be talking about how Web3 companies are making significant progress in travel, perhaps more than you might think. Lorraine will come in to talk about outsiders entering the OTA market, which is referring to the flurry of non-travel brands, including financial institutions, primarily entering travel. And I co-authored our report on generative AI with Kathy, so I'll be presenting that one. Then Hollis will talk about eVTOLs and how they're almost ready for prime time. Adam will jump in to talk about the real-time revolution in hotel operations. And then Kathy will be back to close us out with an update on what's happening with super apps. So enough suspense, let's get going with Robert on social media, influencers, and social commerce in travel. Robert, if you could please turn on your camera, unmute, and take it away.
Great, thanks very much, Mike. Yeah, we only have 5 minutes, so I'll get right into it. It's really interesting. The goal of every travel marketer is to have efficient direct consumer relationships. They want to cost effectively expand their brand reach, enhance traveler engagement, and maximize customer lifetime value. Very, very simple. Now, how can they do that? Primarily, if you look at sectors such as fashion, beauty, luxury, they're doing very well in that with social commerce. And really what social commerce does is it lives at the intersection of media, content, product, and data. And it integrates all of those factors. And that's always been a challenge for the travel industry, particularly in hospitality, but really across the sector, definitely in tourism activities, because of the huge amount of fragmentation and the difficulty of getting all those systems to work together. So the way they do this is they're engaging with influencer communities. Now, this isn't just the Mr. Beasts and the Kendall Jenners and those folks. These are a lot of individuals who've developed their own communities, and those individuals follow that influencer. They like their style, they like their taste, and so they listen to what they do, and they transact and buy. So how does it work? It basically, the fundamental background of it is the analytics on a platform. This is a data-driven thing. Yes, there are all sorts of messaging and campaigns and communications, but it gets down to the data. And the interesting thing, and we'll talk a little bit about a couple of examples, are that ties in the consumers, say in travel, frequent traveler ID. They don't lose anything like that. They get all their points, they get all their credit. It tracks the influencer through their ID. It tracks the brand. The brand drives these campaigns. It tracks the campaign through campaign ID. It tracks the actual products sold. It tracks sales and transaction data. And for all the travel folks who go, oh, travel's complicated, you don't have to deal with returns. That's really, really tricky in fashion. And then the campaign performance, clicks, landing page, and of course, influencer earnings. So how does this work? If you look at a platform like an LTK, which was short for Like to Know It, soft brand backed group, about a $2.5 billion valuation. They connect all the dots between the brand campaign, dealing with the influencers through various collaborations, and the consumer. So when they run a campaign, the brand knows exactly what happened with it. Originated from that influencer. They looked at these products, they purchased these products, goes all the way through the funnel, and then they can compensate the influencer accordingly and give the consumer their points. It ties it all together. Very, very powerful platform. Now that's great for the influencers. They're also brand evangelists, or basically regular travelers. And there are groups like Flip2 that do this through campaigns, and they work with a large number of groups, primarily in the hospitality and destination space. But what they do is they'll run a campaign, for example, a photo contest. Well, the brands can capture all of that photo content because the terms and conditions allow them to do so, and that becomes the brand's content to use as they wish. But those people running, for example, in that contest will then share that with others and say, hey, I want to win this, I can do this. All of a sudden it spreads rapidly. So they have some interesting case studies where, say, a grandmother may have greater social reach, impact, and again, conversion by tying in the brand, the campaign, the channel, the influencer, in this case, just an individual traveler, and the bookings that come from it, tying it all together. So that's really the magic of it. And it's working very, very well in beauty and fashion and luxury brands. It should be something in travel, and there needs to be some plumbing work done on the platform level to make it happen.
Agree. Thank you, Robert. Please turn off your video and mute. And again, please note any questions for Robert or any of the analysts in the chat and QA panel, and I'll try to pose them to them during the Q&A time. Next up, we have Kathy Skitsiana-Walsh on green travel innovation. So Kathy, please turn on your camera and unmute and jump right in.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So in 1970, going back a little ways, bear with me. In 1970, there were 310 million air passengers. By 2019, there were 4.56 billion. This broader accessibility of air travel has had enormous benefit. I think we can all agree that there's real value in travel, but there have also been consequences for the environment. Tourism is responsible for about 8% of global greenhouse gases. We've also seen individual communities suffer the effects of over-tourism. There's been a lot of strain on popular tourism destinations, from overconsumption of resources to rentals, limiting access to affordable housing, and other challenges. So this is a problem clearly that the travel industry has wrestled with for a long time, with varying degrees of enthusiasm. But there are a few reasons why we felt it deserved a place on our trends list in 2023. As the industry continues to recover following the pandemic, there is momentum to build back better. And we're really at a crossroads. The market can either take action to become more sustainable through innovation, or the industry will eventually be forced to do so by crises and regulation. And we're already seeing some signs of increasing regulation. France has banned some short-haul flights. There's debate about what the real impact of that is, but cities, including Barcelona and Venice, are imposing entry fees, and governments are starting to challenge sustainability claims in an effort to fight against greenwashing. Governments are also investing more in sustainable tourism projects as they fund recovery and push to meet their own environmental pledges. But the pressure is also, perhaps for the first time, coming from travelers. Travelers are more concerned with their environmental impact and more motivated to take action, and this is particularly true for younger travelers. Lastly, I think as people start to feel the tangible effects of climate change, as climate chaos and severe weather events impact individual communities, it becomes more than a hypothetical. It becomes real, and the need for action just feels more pressing. So there's been some progress in the last couple of years. We've had hundreds of travel companies make public commitments to take action on sustainability. The tourism industry has launched several initiatives committing to decarbonization. We have the Glasgow Declaration, launched at the UN Climate Change Conference in November of 2021, aligned tourism with the Paris Agreement, with over 700 business and government signatories committing to have emissions by 2030 and reach net zero emissions before 2050. We have the Toulouse Declaration, signed in February 2022 by the EU member states and 10 other European nations, supporting the efforts of EU aviation to reach net zero by 2050. Committing to reduce emissions is a great first step, but travel companies need to then establish an action plan for how they're going to meet these specific targets. To do that, there's a need to accurately measure emissions, understand how specific actions will impact emissions, track progress, and this part is important, provide transparent reporting. Intrepid Travel is one example of a travel company that has provided pretty detailed reporting on its sustainability program, and we look forward to seeing more information sharing and transparency in the industry. Anybody who wants to learn more about some of these initiatives can check out the Global Sustainable Tourism Council's criteria for sustainability in travel and tourism for some more information on objectives. It's great to see some collaboration so that we have some goalposts that are shared and common to the industry. So some within the industry have been working on this issue for decades. Some are just getting started, and there are clearly a lot of challenges. Just to list a few: identifying carbon offset partners that actually have an impact. That's been an issue. For sustainable aviation fuel, there's high cost as well as challenges transporting it sustainably. For electric vehicles, there's a challenge to increasing public charging stations, potentially the need to upgrade electrical grids. But possibly the greatest barrier is the need to balance short-term economic benefits with long-term social and environmental goals. And travel as an industry has been hit with a number of crises over the past decade that demand immediate attention, the pandemic being one of them. So it's always a challenge to balance those short-term needs with longer-term goals. But if making travel sustainable was easy, we would have done it already. But it's clearly time for more aggressive action and innovation in this area. And the good news is, beyond the moral imperatives, sustainability is actually good for business. A meta-analysis published by the NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business showed that sustainability initiatives drive better financial performance due to improved risk management and more innovation. So we look forward to seeing more innovation in green travel.
Oh, you're muted, Mike. Mike, you're muted.
Oh, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, so thank you, Kathy. And Norm, next will give his update on Web3 and how it's proving its value in travel. So Norm, feel free to start when you're ready.
Thanks, Mike. Well, it's amazing for me to think that it was back in 2017 when I gave a keynote speech at the Phocuswright conference around blockchain. And at that point, I was explaining the basics of blockchain. I talked about its potential impact in lots of different areas. I encourage you, if this is a subject, blockchain or Web3 as a broader subject that you're not familiar with, I have authored, I think, 4 or 5 different pieces over the years, and some of my colleagues have often also authored other material. And so please take some time to educate yourself, because there's an assumption that you understand what this technology is to begin with. But the key thing about what's happened since I had that initial presentation at Phocuswright is that we're now in an environment where we actually have real companies doing real work in a variety of areas across all the subsegments of the travel industry using blockchain technology. And it's really quite an exciting change. And when, it was mentioned by, I think, Robert in his presentation, we have to have some plumbing changes. Well, that's what we're talking about here. It doesn't sound sexy, but we have some inherent problems around legacy technology in our industry. And that's in all sectors, whether it's hospitality, whether it's airline distribution, whether it's travel agency, either TMC or OTAs. Each of the segments is challenged by being constrained by old technologies. And we're kind of in this world of multiple APIs. So everyone has to connect into an API. Well, the network effect of blockchain and the broader subject of Web3, which also includes AR and VR and the metaverse, is really a trend that's not a travel trend. And that's the important thing for me to emphasize here. We're talking about a trend that is an IT trend that is transformational. And so when we look at these different companies in this article, you can see how they're applying this new technology to solve real world business problems in travel. So the first one on the first bullet here talks about increasing the efficiency and lowering the cost of, in particular, payment and settlement, because the interesting aspect of blockchain technology is it combines the two together. Secondly, the idea of doing more direct distribution, a lot of the themes around customer intimacy and customer knowledge and customer data is actually today inhibited by the lack of sharing of data across the value chain. And when you implement a blockchain solution, what you are essentially doing is removing some of the barriers. So we have direct distribution examples for airlines, for hotels, for short-term rentals, in the corporate market, in the leisure market. It's happening throughout the industry. And in fact, the report that I'm referencing here has 17 different companies who are doing work with Web3 and or blockchain today. And I encourage you to read that and understand what these companies are doing, because one of these, even the small company, may end up being the next big unicorn that's going to change things in travel. Creating NFTs. The term NFTs have kind of gotten a poor rap, because people think of Bored Apes and art and rich people collecting digital art. You don't understand it, right? But really the value of NFTs is digitizing the certificate of ownership. And now there is some question, I think, in the marketplace, and was certainly mentioned at the blockchain session I did at the conference last year. We had a workshop where there's some question on whether the secondary market, in other words, kind of like a StubHub, so you have NFT tickets for airlines, for hotels, whether the hotel industry, whether the airline industry will be happy and will try to constrain a secondary market that could be created by this. That's still a question that's a little bit unknown. And last, the emergence of a dedicated travel industry blockchain. And this is really interesting because that also takes advantage of something called a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. In other words, rather than having a single company controlling things, a DAO actually allows the participants on an equal basis to manage the network, manage the nodes, manage the flow of information. So I just want to close by saying that this is not something that, again, as I emphasized in the beginning, that's a travel thing. Think of the internet. Has the internet changed your business? This is the next phase of the internet, and it's happening now. And we have companies, big tech companies like Microsoft and Accenture and even the World Economic Forum, which is not a tech company, obviously, promoting and really pushing, this idea of decentralized marketplaces. So please pay attention to this, understand what's happening, and check out this report, because I think you'll find there may be some companies there that could be a future competitor or a current competitor of yours. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, Norm. All right. Next up is Lorraine on outsiders entering the OTA market. So Lorraine, please turn on your video and unmute.
Thank you.
There you are. Thanks.
I want to start this section by asking, why do so many companies want to be online travel agencies? Because it seems like the beginning of online travel, a lot of non-travel brands, non-travel companies, such as phone companies and retailers and affinity groups and media companies, have wanted to become online travel agencies. And, a lot of that is understood. I mean, online travel agencies today represent more than a fifth of all travel booked in the world. But it's also a very much consolidated market with three major players. So many non-travel brands have tried, but few have succeeded. Now, there are some successes. And for example, I'm going to mention ARP. They use the Expedia platform, but they're very successful, an affinity group with a very successful travel play. The other one is Costco Travel. Now, Costco has built its own platform. It's available to its nearly 120 million members. And it sells travel alongside, say, tires or 80-inch televisions. And it might be the closest thing that we have in the States to a super app. But now we're hearing more and more about financial institutions also getting into the online travel agency game. And what do they have to gain from it, right? They're certainly making lots of money in fees, and do they really, need to get into the travel business? Well, the trend is really related to the fact that there is little risk in becoming an online travel agency when you use the white label offerings of the major players out there. So the three major players offering these white label solutions are Expedia and Booking through its Rocket Travel by Agoda, and Hopper with its Hopper Cloud. And these offerings come in many different shapes and sizes, but basically they offer plug and play options for anyone who wants to enter the travel industry. Now, some of the more recent banks to have come online are, and I'll just mention a few that were in our, you read about them on Phocuswright for sure. MasterCard recently partnered with Expedia. That's with the Travel with Rewards partnership. A city uses Booking's Rocket Travel platform, and Capital One is using the Hopper Cloud, and Capital One is also a major investor in Hopper. And basically, most of these players aren't really looking to make a lot of money, or at least they shouldn't be. Now, instead, what they're seeking is loyalty and retention, and providing the value-added service, right? Providing something that is can connect them with their customer, because travel, it connects all of us. So once they kind of take this kind of universal desire to travel, right, and kind of apply it to their brand, well, that makes their brand look pretty good. So you think about it, you're already using your credit card. in most cases to book your travel. And maybe you're even accruing points through some of the supplier branded travel cards. So the banks are saying, yeah, okay, so you're using my card to book it. Why don't you to book the travel, especially when you're even on the road and now you're using it for everything throughout your journey? Why don't you also use our platform to book your travel at the very beginning? So in the case of banks, and use it, and this is very easy because you're on the app already, again, making that transaction. So why not pull it all together? So in the case of banks, it's really getting more people to use their card to accrue points. Now I'm accruing points that I can either use for more travel, maybe for a discount travel, maybe I'm redeeming points, maybe I'm redeeming points from another major purchase I made that's not travel related and using that now to purchase travel. Also, in many cases, as I mentioned earlier, these cards also have relationships with so many suppliers, hotels and airlines. So in many cases, as a consumer, you might even be double dipping into all of these various loyalty programs, which can make it a bit confusing. But not for the banks, because they're not only getting now your fees, right, and your interest as well, but they're now also getting a commission. So a good example here is JP Morgan Chase. So JP Morgan is actually building their own through partnerships and acquisitions, building their own online travel agency platform. And they're in the process of building this, but they are already saying that they're going to get, again, not just transacting on the card, they're getting a 10% commission. And they reported that in 2022, they booked about $8 billion in travel, and they expect in 2023 to book another $10 billion. So it's more than an ancillary business. It could be decent revenue for Chase Travel, and it's chasetravel.com. Now, is this trend meaningful really for the big picture, right? Because we're talking long tail, right? We're talking all these banks, and these are big fish. They're financial institutions, but they're in a much bigger pond called travel, and they really don't know anything even about travel. But when you think about it, what it really does is it further fragments the market, and it can have a relationship with share shifts. So perhaps one example is I'm planned on using Booking.com, but because I'm a MasterCard holder, perhaps I find it more convenient now to book my travel. The MasterCard app through their Travel with Rewards program, now that booking is going to Expedia. So of course, yes, the big winners are the online travel agencies that are providing these platforms. And Expedia most recently said that its first quarter B2B revenue from its B2B operations were up 55%. Hopper makes more than 40% of its revenues from Hopper Cloud. So yes, this is big business. Of course, it's not all from these non-travel brands. Most of it's from travel agencies that are using these platforms, as well as airlines and hotels, tour operators and whatnot. But it is growing business. So I just want to ask first of all, for all the OTA wannabes, yes, this is a great hook. It's a great hook to build that relationship, those partnerships with your customers, and to increase spending among your customers. But for you as a consumer, are you going to use your bank's app to book travel? So I think that's a question that has not yet been answered. So it's certainly wait and see.
Great question. Thank you, Lorraine. Appreciate it. All right, and it's my turn. As I mentioned, I co-authored our report on generative AI with Kathy on how it is transforming the travel cycle. And it wound up being quite a long report where we cover some of the history of ChatGPT and other tools and how they work, but mainly try to document use cases as well as think through future and potential use cases, so current as well as future, throughout each stage of the consumer travel life cycle, from inspiration to shopping to booking to in destination and sharing, as well as promising uses in business operations. So starting with inspiration and planning, that phase, we already see significant disruption here, because one of the things generative AI tools are already very good at is recommending where to go and what to do, just giving you ideas. And the more direction and more details you type into your travel query in a tool like ChatGPT, the more it can give you personalized recommendations for destinations you might want to visit, detailed itineraries for what to see and do on the ground, much the way a travel agent would. So there's perhaps a new threat for travel agents here, although the other side of it is that these tools can digest agent expertise, which can help to further increase the relevance of recommendations with that specialized knowledge, which ChatGPT doesn't necessarily have. And we've already seen a lot of travel companies plug into ChatGPT via the API to build their own solutions, leveraging their own data. And then I wanted to share one of the more speculative use cases I thought would be interesting to mention, which is the creation of customized previews of places and experiences to help travelers get a better sense of what it could be like under certain conditions. So as an example, if you're looking at a river raft tour, you might be able to get a good feel for what it would be like on a rainy day versus a sunny day, or in rough waters versus calm waters. And then next, in the shopping and booking phase, we thought through the implications of these extremely capable natural language interfaces in contrast to the typical set of input boxes and drop downs we're all accustomed to using to input our dates, departure city, destination, and preferences. And to me, it's an open question. It's still such early days. It's an open question on what interface will be better. And I think we'll probably start to see the merging of aspects of both text only and input, drop down type of input. And one of the big questions we pose is who will have better command of these tools and how their use might tip the balance of bookings between suppliers and intermediaries. Generally speaking, historically, intermediaries have had an edge in technology adoption. And we also thought about how the shopping process could be further personalized when paired with voluntarily shared personal data, such as in the near future case of incorporating self-sovereign identity solutions, which promise to allow travelers to easily share their personal data with travel providers, like their home address, preferences, loyalty programs, and travel credentials, which could result in faster, more relevant personalization than we've ever seen. And on the B2B side of things, we point out some low-hanging fruit for businesses, such as generating and optimizing website, sales, and marketing copy. Certainly everyone should be thinking about doing this, if not doing it already, because ChatGPT in particular is already very good at this and can save a lot of hours. And we also thought through what generative AI might mean for advertising and discoverability for travel companies in terms of capabilities and limitations of the chat versus search environment, which are increasingly merging, and the implications of a shift in where people start their travel searches and how more curated results might be surfaced as well as monetized. And one of the more unique scenarios we point out is a pairing with NDC technology, which could allow for natural language queries to efficiently tease out and process things like custom offers and frequent flyer benefits during the airfare shopping process. And we conclude the report with some further thoughts on how interfaces might evolve. We believe they need to become more visual because travel is very visual. And this is already happening with the recent enabling of multimodal capabilities, which can input and output images and video. And we note to watch the evolution of autonomous agents, which can execute much of the work involved in collecting information and even booking travel and making changes. There's some really cutting edge stuff happening there. And lastly, we ponder the position that Google's in, as it's so influential and often controversial in travel and has so many capabilities, especially in AI, and so much data that can be used for personalization, but also a lot to lose in getting this wrong and a tough balance to strike given its regulatory scrutiny and the fact that ChatGPT with Microsoft's backing is such a formidable foe. Now, I just want to mention it's such a fast-moving topic. We do great coverage of it. Our Phocuswright team does great coverage of it on Phocuswright.com. So I absolutely recommend going there for the latest developments and to follow what's happening with this topic. So that's up for me. That's it for me. Next up is Hollis on eVTOLs. So Hollis, please unmute, turn on your video. Let's see you. All right, take it away.
Hey, everybody. So I'm going to start by explaining what eVTOLs is, and then we can talk about how and when they'll be used in travel. eVTOL is basically the acronym for Electric Vertical Takeoff and Landing Aircraft. And that's pretty much the George Jetson, if you remember that cartoon, flying around in his family's mobile taxi car. eVTOLs are next generation air transportation for the first and last mile, which means intra-city travel and nearby city to city travel and transport. Our analysis focused on urban air mobility, which the acronym for is UAM, and it means consumer passenger travel. eVTOLs can hold about 4 to 6 people per vehicle, and so they're kind of like thought of as a flying taxi. The value proposition of eVTOLs is that they purport to be less carbon emissions than other first and last mile vehicles like helicopters, short haul planes, shuttle buses, taxis, and ride hailing services. Future eVTOLs may or may not be autonomous, kind of like a big drone that carries people. And these eVTOLs will likely land and take off from vertiports, which are like heliports on top of tall buildings or in obstacle-free locations. Early on, these eVTOLs will run on fixed schedules, kind of like buses do, or you'll have to book a reservation. Later on, they'll be available in a ride-hailing on-demand capacity. And as far as the cost, roughly they've been estimated to be about $2.25 to $11 per passenger mile. Recently, airlines have gotten in on the eVTOL action. So why would airlines want to get into the taxi business? First of all, eVTOLs have been projected to be potentially very lucrative. The UAM consumer projection market is about 32 billion by 2035. And when the market peaks, it could be as large as 500 billion. Right now, there are over 300 eVTOL developers in this arms race. Companies you might hear about frequently in the news these days would be Joby, Eve, Vertical Aerospace, EHang, Lilium, Archer, Citybus, and again, there's dozens of others. Since 2021, major airlines, including American, Virgin Atlantic, Delta, and United, have announced deals to either invest in or make purchase commitments for eVTOLs. And the reasons are both claimed and then inferred. For example, the airlines have claimed to want to be able to access critical information and development technology by buying into or investing in eVTOLs. They want to improve the passenger experience, for example, shuttling passengers to and from airports, particularly ones that suffer from congestion, clogging, and a horrible to and from experience. There's an obvious advantage to help the airline industry meet its 2050 net zero carbon emission standards, which Kathy referred to earlier. And those standards need to be met starting in 2028 as far as some regulated mandated reductions. And one could say that eVTOLs allow airlines to appear innovative, conscientious, and relevant to consumers as well as the market. There are some timeline hurdles and questions. eVTOLs are going to be a reality soon, but how well will they be adopted? What are their challenges and what are the outstanding questions? First of all, there's varying timelines for certifications. For example, eVTOLs have been approved for passenger flight in China already, but in Europe and US, where the airspace is more regulated, it's likely to be closer to 2025. And even being certified for airspace doesn't mean that everything else will be ready. Will pilots be trained and certified? Will there be vertiports built? Will there be charging stations? Will there be consumer demand yet? And speaking of consumer demand, there are widespread consumer adoption obstacles. There's a lot of obstacles. There are a lot of perceptions about safety. Are these vehicles safe? Are the pilots qualified? What about crashes? We don't want to end up with a Titanic explosion in the middle of the sea kind of thing, except it's in the middle of the air. What about noise? Will it be very noisy in flight? What about the on-ground and ambient noise for the surrounding areas affected by eVTOL travel? Privacy, think about drones. Will people be flying past other homes and see into people's windows? And how about the aesthetics? What are the impacts to our skies? What are the impacts to flying wildlife? And are there really beneficial impacts? For example, are road traffic reductions going to occur, or they're just going to be sum total more vehicles, but now they're in the air and on the ground? I don't see the automobile manufacturers pulling back from marketing and production of their cars, for example. And are eVTOLs truly sustainable? For example, do lithium-reliant electric batteries really present a sustainable option? Are sustainable aviation fuels an alternative that's going to be more widely adopted? And lastly, you have the consolidation issue. how many of those 300 companies are really going to make it to the end of all of this, and how many will be thriving? Those are the questions we ask about eVTOLs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hollis. Next up is Adam on real-time revolution in hotel operations. And Adam wrote this report with his colleague, Dmitry Koltunov. So Adam, jump in.
Hey, Mike, and hello, everybody. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to share some insights around kind of what's happening in hotel operations and how technology is playing a major role. What we're going to talk about today is kind of highlighted in the report, and it really starts with this core principle as we look to the future of how is a lot of data translated into actionable insights for operators. And I think the key trend that we unpack and we talk a lot about is everyone sees data through the presentation so far. You can kind of get a sense, especially as we're addressing how AI is used, the breadth of information that exists. The value of that information is figuring out how to turn it into actionable tidbits, usable bytes that different team members in an organization can utilize. And what we mean by that and what we unpack in the report is saying, what are you doing to think about what a manager in a hotel may need to know if they say are a housekeeping manager or a front office manager? That is different than a GM, which is different than an above property leader with a portfolio of 6 or 10 or 20 hotels. And so the first thing that we're beginning to see more of are companies, just like Actable, looking forward to saying, how do we translate that data into actionable insights that different stakeholders can use? And it gets to them in a means that matters most to them. So instead of just saying, here are a bunch of dashboards or new technology solutions going to give you an email report, the long-term value is getting organizations that can bring together lots of disparate pieces of information from different hardware providers, software providers, and aggregate them and normalize data so the consumer of that data has a much more clear and simple to follow roadmap of the actions that they take off of that data. Kind of building on that a little bit, and something that we'll kind of go into a bit more or that you'll see more in the report, is thinking about these actionable insights for different operators in hotels. So one of the trends that we saw happen through the pandemic was the exodus of many team members as well as mid-level managers in our industry. And many of those folks went to other industries. As those roles, and I think of roles like director levels in large hotels, AGMs in select service and mid-size hotels, as those roles were replaced, they were replaced with a more junior staff or less experienced hospitality team members than those that left. And what that means is those newer team members have less historic knowledge and best practices inherent in their own knowledge base in their head from kind of real life application at work. And so it becomes more important that there are platforms that can provide step-by-step instructions or effectively the guide or the directions that a team member would need to succeed in their role. The days of having like a year management development program in many organizations are no longer in place. And technology, as we kind of think about this trend, is helping ramp up that onboarding period, especially again for that kind of mid-level AGM manager in development. The second thing that kind of really will align is we look to the future of using operations platforms is how do you match up performance and productivity of your team members and really optimize labor. So an interesting data point that we uncovered within our database is looking at the historic wage rate growth of a housekeeper as an example. And how has that housekeeping role in the US actually surpassed the wage rate of a guest service or front desk agent? And so earlier this year, for the first time ever, the average US housekeeper wage exceeded the average US guest service agent or front desk agent wage. Housekeeping is a highly in-demand role. We can't sell as hoteliers, we can't sell dirty rooms, and getting rooms cleaned is key to being able to drive revenue into a business or into your business. So things like saying, recognizing housekeeping wages are up, how do we optimize the hours of labor it's going to take for a housekeeper to clean a room? Are we cleaning every room? So stay over cleans for 2 or 3 night stays. We saw some huge shift changes in the amount of stay over cleans that happen. But those stayover cleans impact how hard it is to get a room cleaned when a guest checks out because it hasn't now been cleaned for 2 or 3 days. And that impacts those minutes per occupied room. And so the trend that we're unpacking is, how is automation, how are tools going to help elevate and enhance the role of team members in hotels like housekeepers in this instance, or guest service agents? So can we make it easier for a housekeeper to punch a room, have all the steps that they have to go through in their checklist for cleaning a room laid out, being able to make it much more seamless to flag up a maintenance issue that may result in a room being out of order? Those little actions, when aggregated, can shave minutes off cleaning time. Better scheduling the order of the rooms a housekeeper operates in kind of on a floor, so it's less manual and more automated. Reducing those minutes per occupied room for clean has a huge impact when we think about the total costs for cost per occupied room, and then the total cost of housekeeping, knowing that wages have gone up, or wages and will continue to rise. So optimizing labor and increasing efficiency is the second trend. And then the third thing that kind of we really unpack in the report is the idea of making communication really work for your future organization and your future team. So are there instances where the guests themselves, and I think this will build a bit on what Michael talked about the use of AI and use of tools like ChatGPT, but are there ways that we can make the human interaction that a guest is having with a front desk agent really focused on what matters to that guest, and less about the transaction, less about having to spend time identifying my folio or swiping my credit card, or having to call and wait and ask, like, can I get pillows delivered to my room, which is much more of a transaction, so that the team member at the front desk or the team member on the phone can focus on, specifically that local experience or that in-hotel service experience that could theoretically be memorable. And so the trend, what we're seeing is adding automation, adding tools that streamline the actions that team members have to take with guests, that can make a pillow example, a guest request, both text, that text gets pushed out to the team members that have to deliver it. The team members that deliver it then have kind of an automation confirmation that the delivery occurred, moving that through in an automated way so that teams can focus on kind of the service experiences. And then the very last thing that kind of we'll share, and kind of before I jump into some questions that we pose or we ask in this report, are really related to making sure that additional manual tasks that happen on the team member side for how team members are working and communicating with their organization are streamlined. And what we mean by that is, think about our future teams in hotels. How are Gen Z team members communicating? A question that I often ask is, how many hotels today still have a printed 2-week schedule in their back office? Who lives like that anymore? Everybody's working and living on their phone and on TikTok, on social platforms. So how come our team members can't swap shifts, or our team members can't see their schedule, communicate with their manager, know when they are being called off or called on for a shift, know when there is kind of a urgent need for a set of guests in a hotel? Make that engagement platform work in the terms of the team member, not in the terms of how historically hotels have operated. And so that trend that we're really seeing move is getting it to be much more focused on team member engagement on the team members' terms. So thanks again for.
Oh, okay. Yes, want to make sure we stay on time, Adam. I wasn't sure if you had another point.
That was it. And I'm going to pass it back to you. On the report, we kind of asked many questions all related to optimizing operations for teams and for guests.
Great. Yes. All right. Sorry about that. And thank you. Much appreciated. And for our last trend, please welcome back Kathy to talk about Super App's secret sauce. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you. So I don't know about you, but I am in a constant battle to free up storage on my phone. I would say the main problem is probably that I take too many videos of my pets. Sorry, kids. But I'm constantly offloading and re-downloading apps on my phone in order to free up storage. And this pretty much sums up how the mobile ecosystem has evolved in the West. For better or worse, there's an app for that. When people are shopping for travel, we know that they visit multiple brands in the course of trip planning, and every brand wants you, of course, to download their app. This can become frustrating for the traveler, and it's going to be a bigger issue as mobile becomes the primary shopping channel, with entering a different login, entering your payment information, juggling storage space, etc. And of course, if your customer's hopping around, it leaves them less time to spend on your app. So travel companies are looking for ways to keep travelers within their own app or ecosystem. And more the last couple of years, we've been hearing references to super apps and wanting to be the next super app or the super app for this vertical or that vertical. This concept, as many of you probably know, originated in Asia, and the app we hear cited most often is WeChat, but there are others: Grab in Singapore, Paytm in India, Kakao in South Korea. Most of these started as a single service like messaging or payments, and then evolved to add a lot of other digital services. So in contrast to the Western paradigm, super app users can access most of what they need on a daily basis in one place. Things like travel, messaging, gaming, digital payments, e-commerce, delivery, ride hailing, etc. This exact model, despite lots of talk of super apps, for many reasons is not likely in the West. For one thing, mobile gatekeepers like Apple and Google themselves, arguably, offering tons of services and well suited to offer something like a super app, although there are barriers. They've done their best to prevent the app within an app model from gaining traction. They don't want apps within an app. They want to, people to pay for the to be in the app stores. There are also greater antitrust efforts, privacy and data sharing concerns, and different consumer behaviors. But there's more as people are doing more things on mobile. There's a need for a more streamlined experience. And some of these challenges can be addressed by things like blockchain and self-sovereign identity. But in the meantime, we're seeing a lot of Western companies pulling from the super app playbook to try to create what are basically pseudo super apps. So, a lot could be said about any of these individual companies, but I'll just touch on a few of the elements that are worth discussing. The first is daily usage, right? Super apps thrive on being integrated into the daily routines of users. And the goal is to be open daily or maybe multiple times per day. Most people only plan a few trips a year. So adding services that keep users coming back is a big deal. Uber is looking at doing this. It's pushing to expand beyond ride hailing to food delivery, and trying out other things, particularly in the UK, testing out, they've got activities, nightlife, now air travel through a partnership with Hopper, and, eventually other products. One way some apps have solved this is through social networking. WeChat, of course, began as a messaging app, and the advantage social networks have is that they already have a large active user base. So famously, Elon Musk has cited plans to leverage Twitter to create X, the everything app. Meta has made efforts to branch out to things like shopping, dating. But like a lot of the big players in the West, things end up ultimately being rather siloed. So these big players like Google, Apple, Meta, a lot of what they offer is more apps to download. Another key ingredient is fintech. Payments can be a pain point for the Western mobile ecosystem, and they're a fundamental function of super apps, creating a seamless way for users to make purchases across services. So coming from the payments arena, we have Venmo, PayPal, Revolut, and Block. In travel, we've seen Hopper building out its fintech unit. And finally, there's gamification. This may be my favorite, but this is all about driving usage and then rewarding users for engaging in desired behavior. And anyone who has seen the way kids use online games these days, it's really like taking on a part-time job. They're programmed so that players have to return like every 2 hours to, water their egg or something so that it eventually hatches and they get a reward. It might be for kids like a new monster to battle, but for adults, the reward could be a discount, a free ancillary, or a loyalty reward. It's basically like fostering engagement with the promise and, making it fun with the promise of something of value. There's a ton to be said about companies like Google and Apple, or in any of these companies really, and their prospects for leveraging themselves into some version of a super app. But the article Super App Secret Sauce delves more deeply into these companies and some of the other features and how they're trying to position themselves. So check it out.
Thank you, Kathy. I just wanted to highlight our events that are coming up. I hope to see you at one of them. We have round 2 of our global startup pitch competition on August 24th. The first round was in May, so the companies that advanced from that round will be presenting on August 24th, and you can register for free to watch that live. And then on September 5th, we're kicking off the next cohort of our Immersive Travel Tech Executive Fellowship, which is a phenomenal program if you're looking to rapidly increase your industry knowledge or network. And on November 13th, we'll be revealing our annual list of Hot 25 travel startups. And November 13th also kicks off our annual global conference in Florida. And a quick reminder that the early bird registration rate ends on July 31st if you are interested in registering for the conference. So thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you for the analysts for doing a great job presenting the trends. We all appreciate it. And as I said, hope to see you at one of our upcoming events soon. Thanks.